Are you satisfied with your life? Do you feel like you have what you want out of life?
Actually, I'm not all the way satisfied because I don't have everything I want out of life. But who does get everything out of life? I have to, just like everybody else, have to kind of like suck it up and go on and do the best you can. That's my best answer I can give you.
To some extent, but I also feel unfulfilled in many ways.
Not yet.
Well, not yet. I mean, I'm kind of going to school for that now. Am I? Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, as much as you can be.
Well, if anybody has that, they're wonderful. No.
What would you like to achieve, accomplish, get out of life?
I think if I had more moolah, although there's a lot of rich people who are very wealthy that are very sad, but if I had a little bit more money, I don't think I'd be as sad as some of the other people claim to be who have a lot of money. But I could be wrong. One day I hope to find out if I am or not.
A lot of monetary things I'd like to eventually, have some money to fall back on and have a nice house and be able to vacation and do things like that. But, for where I am in my life, I'm doing all right.
The sense of belonging, maybe the companionship of another person who understands you and then could help you in ways which you may not be able to help yourself.
Sadly, I think most of the stuff in life you're gonna have to purchase and maybe buy their life, your future, maybe family and stuff.
Everything's easier with money. It doesn't make you happy, but it definitely helps you in some aspects. But then, there's unnecessary stuff that you buy or have fun with for a couple of days and throw away, and you want to get more unnecessary stuff after that.
Does anybody ever get what they want, in totality? No. I mean, I'm an economics major, and one of the principles in economics is that nobody is ever satisfied, and they always want more. So people will always, want to get more utility out of whatever they're working at acquiring.
Interesting little video clip. Do you think that kind of is a pretty fair sampling of what people are thinking when they're looking for true happiness, satisfaction? Did you notice that none of them mentioned Jesus? They also based almost all of their thoughts towards getting something, didn't they? What more can I get to make myself happy? And somehow in our culture, we've equated happiness with getting enough stuff. Have you noticed that? Do you think that's fair to say in our culture? Now, we've been talking about the crazy wisdom of God the last month or so, and several of the aspects of God's counterintuitive wisdom that we've explored so far has touched on this aspect that I want to consider this morning. This is really a key connecting point to all the other parts of the wisdom, and it's really Jesus' answer to the question that everyone seems to be asking: how can I find true happiness? How can I find true happiness? And really, nothing is more crazy than what Jesus answers the question with. That's what we're going to look at this morning. Some of you are probably already thinking, well, does the Bible even talk about being happy? I can't think of any passages that even talk about happiness. I mean, the Bible talks a lot about joy, but happy, is the Bible ever talking about? Well, there's actually a word in the Greek. And really, I would agree with you that you don't see in the NIV many times at all that the word happy is used. But this word in the Greek, makarios, it actually means happy. It means being fulfilled. It means being content. Another word for it is satisfied. Makarios. You know what that word is translated in the English? Makarios? Blessed. Blessed. Is blessed in the Bible anywhere? Just a few times, right? Just a few times. Blessed. In fact, as I studied the idea of true happiness in the Bible, it's Kind of interesting. It kind of struck out to me that the things that you have to do to be happy, according to Scripture, are similar to the things that we looked at last week when we looked at greatness. It seems that if we can find true greatness, that we'll also find true happiness. And you'll remember last week the disciples, they thought that Jesus was headed to Jerusalem to conquer all of his enemies and to start this kingdom and to really put his physical throne there in Jerusalem. And you saw James and John, they were jockeying for high positions in that kingdom. They wanted to be on the right and left side of his throne. And we then see Jesus launch into this discussion about true greatness. So this morning I'd like to look at something similar but a little bit different. If you turn with me to John chapter 13. John chapter 13. We often miss the point, don't we? And the disciples were definitely missing the point here. In fact, a few days after this original discussion about greatness, we find the disciples having an argument about greatness once again. And this is where I'd like to start our discussion about how to find true happiness. So, John chapter 13, beginning with verse 1, it was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. Showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. So we have this setting of the story of the Lord's Supper. Now, Jesus had a lot on his mind at this point in his life, didn't he? He knew that this night was the beginning of the end. He was about to be betrayed by one of his disciples and really forsaken by all the rest of them. Wasn't going to be good. He was going to be wrongfully arrested, wrongfully beaten, wrongfully convicted, wrongfully killed, crucified. Wasn't going to be a great night. Now, this would have been weighing heavy on Jesus' heart, wouldn't it have? I mean, can you imagine thinking that, hey, this is going to happen to me? And it's right here. And isn't this an interesting place to talk about happiness? And to add to the mix, John skips a detail that Luke adds in later. If you look at Luke 22, verse 24 of this story, also a dispute arose among them, among the disciples, as to which of them was considered to be greatest. So can you imagine? Jesus has this heavy, heavy heart, knowing what he has before him, all the difficult things, and here his disciples start arguing about who's the greatest among them. Wow. Boys, I think you've missed the point. Now, in a meal setting like this, it was considered customary for the household to provide one of their slaves to wash the feet of the guests. We've talked about this before. And in this day and age, everyone's traveling around with sandals on dirty roads, and there was just a lot of dusty, dirty feet around. The reason a slave would wash the feet, because it really was considered the lowest job on the customary totem pole, washing stinky and dirty feet. And in this case, with no slave present, it would have come down to the responsibility of the disciples. Definitely not the rabbi to wash the feet. But in the middle of this dispute about who is the greatest, you wouldn't see anyone volunteering, I'm not going to wash feet. I mean, to wash feet would have been admitting that you weren't the greatest, right? They were way too proud for that. So what happens? Verse 3. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. I mean, what is this saying? Jesus knew how great he was, how amazing he was, how powerful he was. He has all of God's power under his disposal, and so, what does he do? Verse 4, he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. He assumed the role of a slave, didn't he? Dressed the part even. Verse 5, after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. I mean, can you imagine? This is Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah. And he's getting down on his hands and knees to wash his disciples' feet. Stinky, dirty feet. What do you think happened to the argument about who was the greatest? Do you think it would have been quiet in that room? Verse 6, he came to Simon Peter and said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Jesus answered, a person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you, for he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Now listen carefully to what he says next. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Jesus is saying here that his washing of feet is this picture, this image of the lifestyle, the life he wants them to live, this model of how they should live if they are followers of him. Then listen to what he says next. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Remember that word? Makarios. Blessed. You will be blessed. You will be happy, truly happy, if you do these things. What things? Well, he's referring to his action of washing feet. His instruction to them to follow his example, the way he lives his life, that he was serving others in love as a way of life. And if you will do that, if you will serve others in love, you will be truly happy. You will be blessed. The pathway to true happiness, according to Jesus, is to give yourself away. Crazy. Now, this wasn't the first time that Jesus was kind of directing them that way, pointing this way. Matthew 16, Jesus is telling his followers that he's going to be killed. And this is the story where Peter stands up and says, no, you can't do that. Well, then Jesus replies, Matthew 6, 24 to 25. Then Jesus says to his disciples, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. Did you catch that? Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. I mean, the second phrase is really a repetition of what Jesus is talking about in John 13. Jesus is telling his followers that they need to imitate the way that he has lived his life. They need to give away their lives. They need to serve. They need to love. They need to be willing to lose their life in order to save it. If you want to be truly happy. I mean, isn't this crazy? It's kind of the opposite of what the world says, isn't it? The world's wisdom would tell us that, you know what? You need to save your life. You need to invest all of yourself into your own happiness. You got to work hard to make yourself happy. But Jesus is saying if you do live for your own happiness, you won't attain it. You won't get it. Jesus is once again going against the world's wisdom, and he's showing this crazy wisdom of God, this counterintuitive, this craziness, totally the opposite. Really, let's take a look at some of the ideas that come from this, and let's just look at a couple of perspectives. One that's self-saving, is what I would call it, versus self-giving. And as we work through these, just think about it. Was Jesus right? Is this really true? Self-saving basically is that I will be happy when I get others to love me the right way. Have you ever heard that before? I mean, you have to find just the right person to love you in just the right way so that you can be happy. Self-giving says that I will be happy as I learn to love others more maturely. Loving, it really has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with me, how I respond to them. Is that true? Self-saving says that I will be happy when I accumulate an abundance of stuff, goods and services for my own self-enjoyment. I mean, we heard that in the interviews in that video. If I could just get enough stuff, I mean, it's really about economics. Just get enough stuff and you'll be happy. Self-giving says that I will be happy the more I use my stuff for the well-being of others. Self-saving says that I will be happy when I get enough time for myself to do what I want to do. I mean, if I can just get a shorter work week, if I can just get more toys, if I can just live the American dream, if I can just get to retirement, I mean, if I can just invest everything that I have in myself. Self-giving says that I will be happy as I learn how to use my time to invest in other people. It's a lifestyle of serving. Do you believe that? Self-saving, I will be happy when I get circumstances going my way. If I could just get my life tweaked and everything going my way, then I'll be happy. Good luck with that. Self-giving says that I will be happy as I love others regardless of my circumstances. I mean, you remember Paul's letters to Philippians? It's a letter of joy, and he wrote it as he was waiting for his own execution. I mean, as you can see, there's really no reconciling self-giving and self-saving. I mean, they're complete opposites. They are complete, it's kind of an either-or situation. It's a choice that you have to make between saving yourself and giving away yourself. And the results are found in Matthew 16:25 that we read. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. So Jesus promises that the self-saving life will always end in emptiness for everyone who pursues it. While he also promises that the self-giving life always results in blessedness, happiness. So is this true? What have you experienced in your life? Would you be able to affirm this truth, this wisdom of God? Now, I think most of you would be able to affirm the truth of the first promise, that whoever wants to save his life will lose it. I mean, you're just pursuing something that you can never get. Yay? Nay? How about the second one? Whoever gives away his life, whoever loses his life for me will find it. What's been your experience? Well, look at some of the results of these lifestyles based on experience. Self-saving actually leads to dissatisfaction. And the reason it leads to dissatisfaction is we kind of experience this temporary happiness, if you want to call it that, by getting some of the stuff that we've been talking about. More stuff, more toys. I mean, you could get all sorts of other things in there. Money, drugs, I mean, all sorts of things that will give you a temporary high if you're pursuing happiness. But then what happens? You've got to get more stuff the next time, more things. It just never gets there. You always end up with emptiness. But in self-giving, you get this increasing contentment with what you have because you know that the stuff doesn't matter anyway. It doesn't make you happy. You often experience short-term excitement because you've given to other people and you enjoy their happiness. And then you definitely get this long-term, deepening sense of satisfaction as you see that what you've done actually makes a difference. Self-saving leads to relational failure. When people try to build a relationship based on expecting the other person to love them just the right way, you can just imagine where that might end up. Usually either breaking off the relationship or something that I've seen more and more lately is this kind of alternating shared selfishness, where you get to be selfish for a while, and then I get to be selfish for a while, and then it's your turn to be selfish and my turn to be selfish. I mean, have you seen that in relationships? They just take turns being selfish. It doesn't lead to a very good path. Self-giving actually leads to relational success. When even one person in the relationship is committed to self-giving, I mean, it just completely changes the dynamics of that relationship. And if both people were actually focused towards giving more, serving more, rather than taking and demanding things, the relationship could turn into something that, it's not trouble-free, but something that could last for years and years and years, something that we'd actually would enjoy. Self-saving leads to emotional problems because your happiness is based on things and you just can't get there. You never do get enough stuff. You end up trying to control people and you've got this anxiety and you don't want to lose any of your stuff, so you're paying attention, and it's just kind of this mad scramble to create for yourself a sense of security and stuff. It leads to frustration and anger and bitterness when people disappoint you and they block you from getting your stuff. Self-giving, on the other hand, grows emotional health. Because we are fallen, we never completely get there, but we do see people who truly sell out to this idea of self-giving, and it substantially reduces their anxiety. I mean, if you're a psychologist, you would see this in the studies that you do. These people find themselves just progressively being delivered from these high anxiety control disorders as they are willing to give and love and serve. It helps them to move away from their self-centeredness. Listen to Isaiah 58, 9 and 10, and it's a picture of this self-giving idea. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and the malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. So when you make happiness your goal, you never get there. But when you choose to serve others as your goal, happiness finds you. Well, how can this be? I mean, isn't this just too counterintuitive, so too crazy? And the real reason we struggle with this is this question: well, who's going to take care of me? Who's going to take care of me? What's going to prevent me from being used up, burned out? Isn't that a valid question? It's a valid question, fair question. And the truth is that this self-giving way of life is impossible unless the God of the Bible exists, the creator of this world, who's designed us to live a certain way, exists. This personal God who loves us, who takes care of us, who's willing to dwell in us and give us this inexhaustible resource of love to give to other people. Look at the next verse in Isaiah 58. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Again, we're going to have a relationship with God. We're going to have to trust in Him, depend on Him. We need His help in this, which is probably why God had designed it this way. I mean, Jesus knew. Did you notice what he knew in John 13:3 in the story? Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under His power and that He had come from God and was returning to God. He knew that He was secure in the love of the Father. He knew His destiny was secure, that God was the ultimate authority in His life. And it was on that basis that He could focus on serving His disciples. He didn't have to worry about Himself. He was there serving His disciples on the very night that He's about to go through this terrible situation. Can you imagine? And so it is with us. We just can't do this without trusting God. This is why Jesus called the disciples to love one another as I have loved you, trusting in God. John 13:34. This is the way I like to think about it. It's kind of interesting. 1 John 4:16 says, and so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in him. Now, for some reason, when I think about this passage, I always think about tubing down the river. Anyone been tubing down the river before? I know several of you guys have. Now, during the summer as a kid, I would love to float down the Boise River. I mean, we would go down the Boise River, and it was just a great way to cool off in the hot sun and just a fun way to hang out with friends. And it was always just a little bit freaky getting into the water because the current, I mean, it's just going, right? And you're stepping into this water, and you're getting your tube down, and if you don't hop in the tube quick enough, the tube gets down the river and you're not in it, and so you're trying to figure out how to get in there and get in your tube at the same time. Does anyone struggle with that? It's just me. Okay. Anyway, so this current, I mean, once you get into the tube, once the current has you, you're going, right? You're just moving down the river. It's just happening. Obviously, this isn't a part of the Boise River, but this is the way I see God's love. When we are in love, as 1 John describes, we are living in God and God in us. And when we're basically in a river. Let's see here. It's the river of God, the river of his love. We're in a relationship with God, and it's this love that's moving us down the river. It's controlling us. When we have this relationship with God and it's right, we can't help but love. Now, when our relationship with God is something wrong with it, then we struggle to love. You notice that? So we allow the Spirit of God, the current of the river, to move us and to influence us when we're in that relationship, when we're allowing God to control us. 1 John 4:7-8, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God, knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. So we're in this river. If we're not in the river, we don't go with the current, do we? It's really that simple. You're either in the river or you're not. If you're in the river, you're loving. You're going with the Spirit. If you're not in the river, you're not loving. It's pretty easy to figure out. Verse 9, it says, this is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. So when we're loving one another, when we're in the river, God's in us, we're in God, and love happens. So how do we maintain a lifestyle of giving ourselves away, of loving, without being used up? Well, we have to maintain a relationship with God, a relationship of love. We have to allow his love to empower us and sustain us. We're going to have to hop in the river. We're going to have to allow his Spirit to empower us. Verse 19, we love because he first loved us. As we come to understand and choose to believe this love that God has for us, somehow we're completed, we're perfected in his love. Like our verse in Matthew 16:25 says. So this is God's wisdom. Only the self-giving life leads to true happiness. But you can live the self-giving life only when you have personal access to God's love. And there's only one way to gain that access, and that's through his Son, living in his Spirit. So do you want to be truly happy? Have you made a decision to receive God's love through Jesus Christ? If you received Christ into your life, if you've allowed the Spirit to lead you through his currents, through the river, you now have God's indwelling love in your life. and you have the foundation to actually be truly happy. Now, this doesn't happen automatically. That's just from my own experience, because I've met some Christians that are grumpy and they're miserable, even though they have Christ in their life. So the key to true happiness is to build a lifestyle where we continue to receive God's love. We have this open and dependent relationship with God, and without this relationship, we're just kind of working in our own power, trying to love someone. It doesn't work. And it really takes us making this daily decision in Him to trust Him, to depend on Him for love. John 15:9, Jesus tells His disciples to abide in my love. Jude 1:21, Jude tells his believing readers, keep yourself in the love of God. So we need to receive God's love through Christ and continue in the Spirit's power. Are you ready to find true happiness? Are you ready to live in His love and share that love with others? I want to share with you, in closing, a video of a lady named Lindsay. And she shares with her life this sermon so well. So I just want to share it with you.
When I first moved to New York City, I thought I knew why I was coming here. It was going to be an adventure. I had my own agenda. I had no idea how much I would fall in love with the kids of the city and how much they would teach me about myself and change my life. I treasure my morning commutes on the subway. It's my time. Sometimes it's my only time with God. In those moments, I know His love for me, and I know that that's going to carry on throughout my day. And I know it's going to help me to do my job well. The Bronx is one of the toughest neighborhoods in the country. 75% of the people live below the poverty line. And where there's poverty, of course, there's going to be violence and sadness and strife, ugliness. Right in the middle of the Bronx is Middle School 223, where I'm a reading and writing teacher to 6th graders. It's where I spend my days every day. A lot of our kids at our school go home to shelters. They go home to homes where they're in charge. They see people get shot in front of their apartment door. Life has not been easy for them or kind to them. Morning. Good morning. Hey guys. Thanks for coming in quietly. Many of my students haven't been loved well. They've been abandoned. They've been promised things that have never come. They've been promised relationships with their fathers or mothers that have never happened. And so they're just worn. They're weathered, and they don't trust love. On the first day of school, the first thing that I tell them is, I've been thinking about you all summer. Like, I love you already. You may not believe this, but you can't earn my love. You could make straight A's all year and have perfect behavior all year, or you can get detention 3 times a week and I'm gonna love you the same. And then I spend all year trying to prove it. So I want you to think back to Monday. We chose that one personal narrative that we're going to publish and celebrate and put out there to the world. Who am I as a person? What do I really want people to know about who I am? Well, it wasn't until recently that I realized that God had been preparing me for this job, for these kids at the school right now. I grew up in Georgia, mostly at my grandmother's house, because my mom and dad were divorced. And then when my dad got married, I felt like I wasn't good enough. He wanted me to be perfect. I just wasn't good enough anymore. But I know I don't need other people to say I'm okay anymore. I did that my whole life. And I think I'm finally done. So maybe now I can just be Lindsay. And if I make mistakes, then oh well. I'm not only as good as what I do. Growing up, and especially now, even as an adult, I still long for that love and acceptance. And God has shown that to me and given that to me so that I can go and give these kids the same love and acceptance that they have always wanted too. Over time, I really do believe this classroom becomes a safe haven for them, a place where they feel accepted and they know they're going to be safe and it's comfortable. I think God loves these kids so much, more than I could ever hope to love them. I think He wants them to rest and to be happy. I think He wants to heal their hearts. Every day they walk out of my classroom, and at the end of the year, they walk out of my classroom forever. It's so hard. It's hard not knowing what lies ahead for them or what type of choices they'll make, and I just have to rest. I've done everything I could do. I've loved them the best that I can. And my hope is that they'll figure out that God loves them so much more than I ever could.
Can you trust God's love enough to give your life away? I can't watch this video and not think of the farmers. Would you guys come up here? I'd like to just close our service this morning with a time of prayer for them. If you guys would just come and surround them. If you guys would just kneel at the altar, it'd be a little easier for us to get around you.